Hi, Robin.
Hi, Brooke. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yay.
So I'm going to do a brief introduction of you. I'm doing a longer one in the intro that isn't part of this conversation. Uh,
Mhm.
but I will mention for listeners that Robin is the executive director of Groundswell Mural Project in Brooklyn. And Robin, do you want to tell us just a little bit about Groundswell and your amazing work there?
Absolutely. So, yes, I'm the proud executive director at Groundswell. So, Groundswell brings together youth, artists, and community to use the transformative power of public art for social and personal change. So, we work in schools, we work in community organizations, and we also have a master studio program. And our goal is to have a long-term relationship with young people. So, some of them may end up becoming artists themselves, but our idea is that they are able to think like an artist and to reimagine the world, and to help us to see like a brighter future for the world and also for themselves personally. We work in all 5 boroughs. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this coming up in this fiscal year. Yes, yes.
Wow.
And we have about 600, murals, all social justice based murals that we've done over the years. So we're super excited to celebrate and to be able to talk to more people about our process and about our work and our amazing artists and young people that make it happen every year.
It's so interesting listening to you give that intro. I mean, you and I are dear friends. I've known you
Yes,
for years. I've known Groundswell for years. And so I don't often hear the sort of intro to the organization because doesn't come up in our coffee dates.
right.
But in listening to it, I'm struck that what I am excited for us to talk about today is really, really intimately tied to what you guys do every day. This idea of making the world a better place. And like I said, part of why I'm having these conversations with folks and why I was really excited to talk to you is that COVID and these, last few months and the murder of George Floyd and the murder of Black people, the most recent murder of Black people all around the country, has really just brought into sharp focus for a lot of people for whom it was not in sharp focus, the deep racial and economic inequities in our country. And we work in the nonprofit sector, and that has historically been the sector, that people turn to for justice, for help, for support in times of need. And we are struggling as a sector. And I've just found myself in all of these conversations recently with you, with a lot of friends and colleagues and peers about what life after COVID, if we ever get there, what it's going to look like, right? What do nonprofits turn into? What does leadership of nonprofits look like? What does the sector look like? And then when you layer on these questions of equity, are we really moving in a more equitable direction? Do all of you and I talked about this last week, all of the Black
Yeah.
Lives Matter statements are, powerfully written, great marketing. Uh,
Mhm.
but are we actually seeing a shift in equity? And what do we need to do? So I just thought you and I could talk about that.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Do
Awesome.
I jump in? Do you want me to start anywhere particular?
Well, I'd love to hear, I definitely have some questions for you, but just before I sort of aim the conversation, with that intro, what are your thoughts about where we are, where your organization is, where nonprofits are?
Mhm.
What are some of it feels like there's
Yeah.
existential threats right now.
I mean, I will say that, I think we're 20 or 21 weeks into this shutdown. Maybe week 20, end of week 20, going into week 21, not that I'm counting. But just for Groundswell personally, it has been, challenging in a lot of ways. And then we've also felt just a wave of generosity. Like there's been some really great, I just want to definitely shout out so many great foundations, but definitely on the top of my list has
Yeah.
been the Brooklyn Community Foundation. I feel like Brooklyn
Yes.
Community Foundation, like the
Yes.
next day we shut
Very
down. The next
incredible.
day they were just like, here's a plan. And, they just really were able to thoughtfully, respond, to grantees in a way that, helped us to be able to provide like emergency funds for our artists who all
Mhm.
lost their jobs, like in one,
Yeah.
in one day. We committed to paying all of our artists, their full contracts, even if the projects weren't finished. Like, we paid all of
I
our
remember
artists.
you and I talked, and you
Yeah,
were like,
that
that's
was something
commitment.
that we
Yeah.
committed to do. So, and we, a lot of our individual donors, some foundations, like, we were able to, with the help of people like, Shitra, and, we were able to get the PPP loan. So we're actually, this fiscal year, like, we're actually, we're in a good place, so I try not to get too, of course, you don't have as many expenses, right? We were able to move all our programming to remote. We still were able to, pay, 30 young people who are, in the middle of their summer program with us right now, even without SYEP, because we're trying to get away from having to use SYEP, because there was a way in which we wanted to work with our young people, that we wanted to have a little bit more control of the structure of the program.
And that funding's really vulnerable right now.
Yeah. And so we'd already planned to not use it, but, we were able to still, be able to create an amazingly intentional summer program with our young people. So in that way, I really feel like, you're asking me about like next year. And I think that, we're already seeing with the, government, the city funding is going to hit us really hard. Like, we're already knowing that that's going to be a big dent. There's so many question marks. And so it's hard sometimes to be of two minds, like to be present and in the future, even though that's the best time, that's the best way to do your work, is to be able to be in three spaces at once, right? You're in the moment, you're looking ahead.
Those three spaces aren't always quite so uncertain and different from one another.
Exactly. And so when people say, well, what's life after COVID? It is such a great question. And it's like, it will continue to be the guiding question, right? I don't feel like I try to stay rooted in questions and less rooted in answers, because I feel like there is answers are so finite. And if you have a really juicy question, the possibilities are endless, right? And so I don't know. I know that it's going to be tough, and that's what I've been telling people. This next year is really going to be difficult for us, and we are not going to be able to really return to. There's nothing really to return to. We have to think about, how do we stay true to our mission? Also in response to what our community needs are and how they have shifted. I often have to return to, okay, you get as an executive director, you feel the pressure of making sure everybody gets paid. We haven't had to furlough people, trying to just, you have the pressure of wanting everyone to be able to have their livelihood. And so much of my focus has been on the money issue, which is my role, right? Just to, to manage that in collaboration with my amazing team and my director of finance. And then there's this other part that I want to make sure that, looking future forward, that I'm like, our communities are asking us or entrusting us to live out our mission, right? So while I'm making sure that this financial piece is happening and thinking about money, I also have to think about, what do our constituents need, because of COVID? And so one of the things that we're thinking about is how can art and public art be used as a tool and igniter for social movements, right? So we know that there's
really so
many really amazing social movements that are happening right now. Amazing organizations who are doing work about immigration rights and police, reform, abolition, defunding, around food insecurity and all those things, and really thinking about how are we working with those organizations to offer our work as muralists, as public art, to help to amplify the messages of organizations that we deeply believe in. How are we working with schools? Schools, that's a huge part of what we do. How are we ensuring that young people are still able to get arts education? We believe that arts, education is a right. that all of our young people should be able to have? Like, how are we talking to people who support us about, now we need you to really help support us in schools, because we know the city is not going to, most of our money in working with schools comes from the city, right? So we're thinking through that. We're thinking about how we can actually work with the schools to rethink about like their messaging around COVID-19 and space, the different kind of, spatial, exactly. How can we work? So it's kind of like, how can we be of service in this role?
So you said so many things.
I know.
I want to follow up. No, don't worry. I'm taking notes. So you mentioned the word possibility, and then you also said we're not going back to what was there before. And I think, I've talked to a lot of organizations in the last 21, 22 weeks, and sometimes I hear the word possibility, right? Sometimes I hear more panic. Sometimes I hear a sense of loss, or a sense of mourning about not going back to what was. And what I think is really interesting about what you just laid out is you seem to really be leaning into this idea of possibility, which is not to say, I don't know if you are also experiencing feelings of loss and mourning, but I definitely hear as well, how can we be of service? How can we use being of service as sort of a beacon or a lighthouse through the uncertainty? Are the ideas that you just lifted up, are they new for you guys? Are you finding that this is sort of an opportunity to think about new possibilities, or are you leaning into, I guess, what's the balance between sort of leaning into what you guys have always done, what used to be, and sort of new ways of being in the world, new ways of thinking about your work? Because there's also a lot of talk about pivoting.
No, I mean, Brooke, it's real hard, because
I thought you were just going to stop there and be like, it's real. I was like, yeah.
That was like, it's real, semicolon. And I think that, one of the things that motivates me, is that, I am not a visual artist. I am a performance artist. But most at core is, I am a deep believer in, social justice. You know what I mean? And, working with young people and believing that art, my way into art is that I believe that art can help to bring about the world that I would like to see, and I would like for my children or children. Am I having another one? No. To grow up in. I'm like, no, child, no. This ain't no hot key for the streets, child. No. That wasn't no leak. So I, come to, this work as someone who, I do this work because I believe this is my contribution to social justice. This is my contribution to, the movement and me in this work. And so when I think about, sorry, the phone's ringing, but when I think about, how do we pivot, or how do we shift? It's like, what do the people need, right? If the only reason why we should exist is because we are here to supply something that people really need, right? And so immediately when we closed and we were thinking about next year, designing our programming for next year, it was like, let's talk to, the teachers in the schools and say, what would you all need from Groundswell? So we sent out, my school-based staff sent out a survey to our teaching partners to say, like, if you were to work with us next year, instead of us saying, this is what we want to do with you, how do we fit into what you need from us? You know what I mean? We know we need to be there for our young people, right? So it's just like, how do we still, create, programming that's relevant to our young people, and that we can still be there for them. And the same way with our community partners. So, I don't know how this is going to shake down. I don't know how, the ability or where some of this funding is going to come from. But what we're trying to move forward is having a plan that feels right for us. And there's definitely, I think I have less, the panic sets in sometimes, but there's so much to do. I think a lot of it has just been being on this kind of hamster wheel of day to day to day to day. And in that sense, it's also been hard to really get deep into a lot of future conversations, because it's, like I said, that kind of two modes, but so much of it for me has just been, all right, we gotta keep going every day. There's a new, like, being so just intently present, right, in the now, but still feeling good that we have, we're definitely leaning into hope. I will definitely say that we are embracing and leaning into hope, because we believe in, we believe that what we're doing is something that, you know, people want and need. And, my job is to, try to maintain as much as, who we are, as possible. And I have to say that the response to people understanding the need for public art right now has been overwhelming. Like, everybody.
It is.
Huh?
Why do you think that is?
I think because so much of this, the Black Lives Matter movement is messaging. I think the young people who are strategizing and leading this movement are so good at communication.
They grew up with that. Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's that. And then there is the brands, right? The brands understand, how do I keep up with this? Like, how do I make sure I'm on the right side of this? They know that there's these people who are about social justice. They also spend money, and I want to be on the right side of this. Yeah. So there's the other thing that we have to be super careful of, and I've tried to be super careful of in the last 21 weeks or whatever, is that a lot of this is performative, right? When we start to talk about people and, wanting, really radical, I want to be able to say Black Lives Matter. We know this movement started back in 2007 with the, when George Zimmerman didn't, go to jail for murdering, Trayvon Martin. That's when, it's been a while. This has been like 13 years of this term. And most of the time people were afraid of it and didn't want to say, you couldn't say Black anything, right? But there's this shift and this turn, and people want to be able, I think, and that's what's been really tricky, because I feel like folks kind of understand, I can just say Black Lives Matter. I can just put it on something. I can just.
That's one of the things I wanted.
I don't have to actually change.
That's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. I have had some really interesting conversations with other, particularly in the arts space, leaders of arts organizations, where they are being invited to produce public art. One woman had some young people invited to write a spoken word piece all about Black Lives Matter, and they weren't going to pay them. There was no, and the response was somewhere along the spectrum of, we never anticipated paying, that's just not how we do things, all the way to sort of indignation that they would even ask. And it made me think of some of the conversations I've had with you about this explosion in interest in public art and the extent to which it is performative as opposed to indicative of true change. And then when I hear those conversations, I'm like, oh, wait. The things that have to change in our sector aren't just about people being more comfortable saying the word Black, right? That is great and good. But the underlying power structures have to change. And I'm interested in your perspective on whether you're seeing that.
No, I'm not.
No.
Okay. Nor do I have faith that it will. Yeah. How about that? I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
Well,
because if it's that easy to get credit and a pat on the back for a statement, there's very little incentive to go beyond a statement.
Right. And like I said, I think, they're like, people have like, oh, that's really kind of all we have to do. It's kind of also just like the kind of performative aspect. Like, look, I really believe, I have friends who are incredible. I was talking to my friend yesterday. She's an incredible anti-racist like trainer. She does amazing work. Mm-hmm. And then she has these people reaching out to her now to do this work, and they want it done in a certain way. They just want to be able to say that they did it. They want to be able to write on their grant, report that they did anti-racist work. They don't have any intention on really changing, because really changing means you have to give up power.
Right.
You're going to have to shift there's a paradigm shift that has to happen, and no one wants to do anything. I shouldn't say, a lot of people are not willing to do any structural changes, any system changes. It's much easier to paint, right? And to paint black, like, with the mayor, we're going to name every street, in New York City, it's going to be a Black Lives Matter street. Well, look at your policies, right? If Black Lives Matter, then if we say that a budget is a moral document, we know that damn budget y'all just passed does not scream that Black Lives Matter in New York City.
Right.
The way social services got cut, the way that education got cut, the way y'all did the shenanigans when they asked for a $1 billion cut out of a $6 billion police budget, and you didn't really do it, and you didn't. So that is what we're seeing. And you're right, paying artists. Like I've had way too many conversations in the last 21 weeks about, oh, we want you to do this amazing project, Black Lives Matter. And I'm looking, and if we talk, here is our budget. This is how much you have to pay our artists.
Yeah.
And then I'm talking to you right now. I could be doing something else. And this is how much is my time. This is how much is, and it's like, well, I know I had to pay for it. And then you see the project get done. And then, a lot of these projects get done and people did not get paid.
Yeah.
A lot of these artists.
It calls into question, or not calls into question, but it really lifts up when we say equity, when people talk about this sort of next normal, right, that's being constructed as we go along in the months and years after COVID. When we talk about wanting it to be more equitable, what do we mean?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And some of what we have to mean is structural change and systems change and shifts in power. And what I love, going back to what you were saying earlier, just describing the kind of work you guys are doing and the direction you're moving in, I personally think that kind of change starts with meaningful conversation, right?
Absolutely.
Throwing statements at one another isn't a conversation, but if you can actually sit down in a room with school principals, with policymakers, with the people who are writing the line items in that budget, and have them understand the role of public space, the role that young people play in shaping what justice looks like, right? The kinds of conversations you guys are using public art to start, those are messy and they take longer. But what I think is beautiful about the work that you're describing is it's about starting those conversations, right? And yes, there's a performative element to that. There's a branding element to that, and that's powerful. But it marries that with, let's actually sit in rooms with some decision makers and muddle through our disagreements. Maybe one of us is going to say something wrong, but we're not going to leave the room until we figure it out, right? Like those are the conversations.
And those are those longer term, like nothing. A lot of what has been presented to me, and speaking in the eye, this is like, can we do this in a week? Right. Can you do this in a few days? Right. So even the turnaround time is it's not about any real shift or change. And even I've had conversations with, funders in the last 20 weeks. Some of them have been great. I shouted out Brooklyn Community Foundation. And some of them, I wish they would shift the way that they deal with their grantees' time. I've had people ask me, questions about I'm thinking about in response to the current moment, I'm thinking about this new, what do you think? And spending my time and da-da-da. And then it's what do I get out of that? You know what I mean?
That's an equity issue too. That's another shift in power.
Because who says no to talking on the phone with the funder about something, right? You know what I mean? Who's going to say no to that? So I just helped you write your new, grant that I'm gonna see my idea in a couple of months, right? So, what am I actually, how do these shifts and dynamics change? I've had people, could you send me, an LOI for something that you want to do based on this? And I spent a whole weekend working and heard nothing about it, right? So the way in which those power dynamics actually need to shift, as well. So I think it's the actual work of making change is really hard. I don't think that it's going to be, I don't think it's going to last really long. I do think for some people, this is a moment, right? There's a moment and the moment will pass. there's many of us who this is our lives. This is every day. We'll still work through it. I think it's really important to figure out how you can leverage it while it happens, right? So when the moment is here, how do you leverage it to get what you need? These young people who are marching on the street, and who people are, some people are happy that they're doing it. Some people are like, these disruptors. A lot of people are getting promotions right now based on the work happening on the street. Let's be real. All this work, this movement work that's happening, there are companies, organizations who are now, well, let me get this Black person in this role, or let me get, based on what these babies are doing outside. And so the people who are also like, seeing their promotions happen need to be thanking those foot soldiers on the street, because that's always what happens. To kind of shut down or to kind of respond to this, a lot of us get promoted, get more jobs, get more contracts based on what happens on the street. So it's always important for us to remember the connectivity, right, that happens.
What's interesting, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the points about leadership you were making, and sort of sitting in these dual spaces and leveraging this moment. But what you just said made me realize that I wanted to say kids, but they're in their 20s. The young people marching were in elementary school when Trayvon Martin was killed, right? Their entire world, my oldest son is 6. So you have people out in the streets now who were his age.
Wow, that's wild.
Don't remember a world where we weren't grappling in some very meaningful way with the things they are in the street marching around. And it made me think of a podcast, I love podcasts, that I heard, where some of the young people marching in Hong Kong were talking about how they were born and grew up, the only world they knew involved debates around and grappling with questions of citizenship. And so these young people out in the streets, of course, they're the ones leading this movement. Of course, they have the energy, and they are marching well beyond the number of days and weeks that, people thought would be sustained, because this is their world. This is the only world they know. These are the only issues they've known. And I wonder, leaning into hope, if, some of the cynicism that I have at my age about there are these moments and then they pass, if maybe if this spark can actually turn into a flame, because the people sort of stoking the flame, the younger people, don't know an alternative. They don't know to go backwards. They don't know to let the spark go out. This is their life. And so maybe that energy, and they're 20, so they have more energy, right? And so maybe they will continue to push us as a society, as individuals, to have some of those tough conversations.
I absolutely, these young people are not going to slow down.
Yeah.
Like they're constantly, I follow a lot of the movement for Black Lives, and a lot of that is like, just the strategizers are like young Black women the strategies that they're implementing are brilliant, and they're taking from the past and they're updating it for themselves. Like, I think that movement for Black Lives is just going to continue to get stronger. I think this kind of phase of, like, I guess my cynicism comes in is, how long will white people be as responsive as they are to me right now, being like, let's talk about you being heading up a Black-led organization. Like, let's talk about their willingness to want to engage on that. Or when we're there, because we've already heard something like, oh, this is so tiring, the fatigue of that. For white people, like, how long will they be wanting to engage in this? But the young people, it's not going to slow down anytime soon. They're going to continue to push. I think it'll just morph into something different. I think in terms of being a nonprofit leader, like, I've never received as much outreach from people who want to, how can I help? Like, I'll give you. So I'm like leveraging this moment, like, all right, this is how you can help. This is this is what we do. And yes, you can support. And I'm really upset I missed out on Mackenzie Scott. I was like, no one I know knows Mackenzie Scott. Jeff Bezos' ex-wife who just gave, I don't know how many $1 billion. I'm like, how did I not get on that train? Like, what? Who did I need to meet? Like, this is what I'm talking about, because you have to be able to leverage it as long as, this is my thing, as long as I know where I'm at, and I'm not confused on where I'm at, I can work around it. I can work.
And you talked earlier about, this idea of rooting where you are in service. The organization I ran, I started, and the first few years was all about clarifying the need, right? Anytime you are building an institution, you are building a movement, it is in response to a need. And this is an interesting moment where organizations that have existed for 2.5 decades have a real opportunity to go back to what is the need that we are addressing, right? And I heard you speak directly to that, and that's an anchor, so that as you are having to sit in the future and the past and the present and leverage this moment and sort of respond to the tyranny of the immediate, and also find some moments to pause and think strategically while you're doing all of that as a leader, it sounds like you are trying to ground yourself in what's the need? What's the need? What am I responding?
It's like boiling it all the way. Like when people hear, people are much more willing to talk about social justice now. Like when I was first starting out, like as a program director back in 2004, people would, you just want to turn over tables and the kids gonna be blah, blah, blah. And what people didn't understand, like, no, I actually am a social justice educator because it's rooted in love. No one talks about that except for people who do the work. It's really about, I love people so much. I am clearly a woman of African descent. I love all people. I love my people. I love Black people. And I love justice. I cannot stand injustice, right? I don't love oppression, right? I love liberation. All of it. If we go to the whole kind of philosophical thing, that there's only two emotions, there's love and there's fear. Yeah. Everything else that's not love is fear. Social justice is love. It is love activated. Right? It is. So when I'm thinking about people, our murals are beautiful. Our murals are beautiful. The process is even more beautiful. And we just had young people on our, did a process share yesterday. They talked about what they learned and what they value. And they kept coming back. I feel cared for here. I feel like this is like my second home. Like that is why we do the work. You all see the mural. Right? But what we're doing is cultivating these loving spaces. Yeah. Not saying they don't have loving spaces anywhere else, but what we know is that young people,
you're part of the world.
Right. It's like people have the young people, Black and brown youth, they have an achievement gap. They don't have that. They have a connection gap. They have a network gap. Yeah. Their network is the gap. Right? Yeah. They don't know the right people they need to know. And so we need to be able to fill that gap and to supplement whatever they're not getting in schools to make sure that we're providing it. And what the public sees are these beautiful, wonderful murals, right? But it's like, when that is your center, that we are here to love young people and love community, it's hard to, it's motivating, right? It's a motivating factor. Like I said, people hear social justice, they have their own connotation, but it really is rooted in love. That is where we just all want to be free. Yeah. And when you come from a people that has never experienced true freedom, it is a constant march toward a reality that you have never seen. And so that's also where the hope comes from. Yeah. When we ignite a radical imagination, you have to radically reimagine what this world can be and work every day to figure out how to get closer to that. And so there was this talk about, like, I was watching Oprah, she was interviewing the guy who did the Happiness Project, and he talked about the difference between happiness and joy, and happiness being circumstantial and joy being something that's always within you. And at first I didn't understand that. I was like, what? And I was like, oh, as a Black person, I definitely know joy. Like, because if we were looking for our circumstances to make us happy, we would just be a puddle on the floor. But to be able to we have tapped into that joy. So I bring that to my leadership practice, right? I think about like, okay, how do I constantly remind our staff why we do this work? You know, because if you don't have that grounding, if you don't love justice and, you know, Black and brown people and art, ain't nothing I can do to make you stay here, because that's usually is sometimes the only thing that can keep you motivated and going. It is that passion and that love for believing that you are helping to make the world better for you. And that's the other thing, because when people, especially going back to this Black Lives Matter stuff, it's like, oh, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to help you all. Like, no, 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 no. If you don't have skin in this game and you don't understand why you need to be concerned about justice and fighting for just how it affects you, don't even come and rock with me, because had you understood it, we wouldn't have this fool in the White House in the first place, because this house has always been on fire. And now the fire has come to your porch. And now you're concerned. Had you listened a long time ago, we wouldn't be in this situation. So
well, I can't add anything to that. I was getting goosebumps. I just love you, Robyne. I
love you, Brooke. And that's what we need, people like you, because like I be all over the place. And I be needing the radical strategy of Brooke. The radical strategist.
Well, that's why we work well together.
The person who can strategize freedom. Like you are like the freedom strategist. That's my new title for you, Brooke. Brooke, freedom strategist.
Oh, I love it. I'm gonna get a t-shirt and a mug.
Liberation strategist.
That Brooke, is fantastic.
Strategies for liberation.
I love it. Liberation strategist. I love that. Yes. I wanted to have an honest conversation about what's coming, about the next normal. And that's what this is. This was great, rooted in love. And if we can continue to tap into joy, then perhaps this moment will actually lead to some structural systemic change. You know, I want to be hopeful. I do. I want to be.
You should be. It's going to be hard. And and the thing about it is, some things are going to burn to the ground.
And maybe they should.
And that's the thing. It's like some things are going to burn to the ground. And I'm willing to say, if Groundswell isn't what the people need, then, you know, we got to figure out, like, do we do something else? Do we still need to be here? But we're going to fight every day, because I truly, truly believe that we are part of what is coming next. And like I said, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I do know that we are a part of the newness of it all. You know what I mean? I just feel like, you know, my job is to just figure out how to stay open. And the thing about it is the resources, right? What I'm really hoping is that people understand the importance of funding and helping to sustain small to mid-sized organizations run by folks of color.
Unrestricted funding allows innovation.
And wasn't that interesting how when everything shut down, I loved it. All the funders were just like, do whatever you want. I'm like, could you have said that anyway, though?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, talking with some funders, and going back to the question of like, are there real structural changes happening? That's actually one place where I am really hopeful, because I have had so many more conversations with funders in the last 3 months where they just internally are working with themselves, with their boards, to say, if we were able to relatively quickly, and some were, you know, faster than others, turn around and say, here's unrestricted money, here's money for an additional year, you know, call our grantees, tell us what you need, work in more genuine partnership with our grantees. If we could do that in May of 2020, it means we can do it in May of 2021 and May of 2022, right? It means that it is possible for us to function in this way. And I do think there are some very interesting conversations happening in philanthropy about how are we not understanding our own power? Where are we getting this wrong? And that's actually really been interesting to see.
I know you have the plug on them, and this is something you can educate me about, because I'm coming from like the side of like, why do I not always see, but like, what would be hard about people not putting on their website by invitation only? Like, what would be
Agreed.
Like, what would be hard? And then it's like, if you're gonna be that, foundation that's like by invitation, which is elitist to me, but could you at least say, and with an asterisk, and this is how you can be invited? There has to be some demystification of that.
Yeah,
Like it's gonna be, there's something about funding, and so sometimes with foundations, like you gotta wait till you get the golden ticket, and there's like this
information is a form of power, right? And so hoarding the information versus sharing the information, being transparent, those are ways of shifting power also.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I think some of that has to come from people outside of philanthropy, right? Grantees calling the program officers that they do know, that they are comfortable with, and maybe even some that they aren't, and saying what you just said. There's, in the same way that you are trying to be sort of open to what is needed, I do think that there are more foundations than I've ever seen that in their own way are more open than they've been.
That's so good.
Listening to their grantees, to having a grantee call and saying, look, this proposal, this RFP is going to take me 13 hours. I could just send you a page and you will have all the information you need, right? Now, that is not to say that the process will change overnight.
Right.
But I have talked to probably a dozen or more organizations where the EDs just got so fed up talking about, like, I have to strategize, I have to I don't have 13 hours for this proposal. I'm just going to call my program officer and say, what else can we work out?
I love that. I think that's there. I do feel a shift in terms of us feeling more, able to ask for what we need.
Yes. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just be like, I was talking to someone on my staff, I was just like, we're just going to ask for this increase, because what they're going to say no, they can just, it's not, we ain't going to get in trouble. Exactly. Like, we have to be bold, and just, they say no, then we just, all right.
No, that's exactly right. Be brave. And I think that, power, this is probably a little harsh, but power is either given or taken.
That's the truth though, Brooke.
So either institutions do the work, people and institutions do the work to give up some of their power, or other institutions, other people have to call, reach out, write, say, here's the part I'm going to take. And to me, that power dynamic that exists between a lot of program, foundations and individuals, or foundations and grantees, some of that shift comes from grantees calling and saying, I don't have anything to lose, by saying, actually, I'm not going to do it the way that you've asked me to do it. I can't. It's bad for my organization. That's in power too. And it'll be interesting to see in the coming months how much more of that happens, particularly now that we're heading out of this emergency phase where foundations are like, oh my God, we'll do anything. Now we're going to start to see what they settle back into,
Yeah. And just for me, I know, just even shifting my mindset from being a grantee to being a partner.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yeah. That's a mindset shift for you and the foundation. Absolutely. I love it.
Right. Like, this is my mission. This is your mission. This is how we help each other, as far as be like, more, please. You know what I mean? It's just
like individual donors too.
Exactly.
Right. It's, I am creating change in the world. Do you want to invest in this change?
Right.
We're going to be partners. Your role will be a funding role. My role will be an execution role. And those roles are both important. And let's put it together. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think there's some real shifts coming. Well, thank you so much, Robyne.
Thank you for inviting me. It's such an honor to be invited to talk to you.
I always love talking to you about this stuff. And I know I will talk to you again really soon.
Okay, well, go back and just keep being brilliant all the time so you can help us because you be helping us, Brooke.
You go on and do all the amazing, brilliant things you're doing. And it was just actually, as a side note, really wonderful to hear just more in depth about, you know, what you're over there building and doing. And you're an incredible leader, Robyne. And it's just been great giving you an opportunity to share some of your wisdom with the rest of us.
Yay. Thank you so much, Brooke. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.